In what could be the biggest game of the Neil Brown era at West Virginia, the Iowa State Cyclones roll in to Morgantown. But they're going to be facing a cold rush, baby, because the Mountaineers will have their all-black cold rush uniforms on. The kickoff is at 8 p.m. It's a night game inside Milan Puskar Stadium. They'll have the new LED lights going full force. It's going to be an exciting time. Jonathan, how you doing tonight, man?
Couz, I'm ready. I mean, what else could we ask for, right? You
man.
know, we talked last week about how much excitement this game could bring with a win. And not only did we get a win, it was a dominating win. So here it is. We've talked about it. It's in front of us. Man, I'm ready to roll.
Yep, me too, man. Yeah, this is episode 11 of the Golden Blue Breakdown Show. Couz here with Jonathan Martin. We're here to preview Iowa State, and we'll also talk a little bit about last week's game too, the win over Oklahoma State. We'll start there here in just a second. Before we do that, though, I want to give a shout out to my channel sponsor. Since 1931, the attorneys at Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner have been the voice for victims who have suffered serious injury or death. They have a fierce passion for truth and justice and a sincere compassion for those who have been wronged by others. Whether you have been in a car accident or fighting with an insurance company, or you or a loved one has suffered serious injury or death due to medical negligence, we will ensure your voice is heard loud and clear. Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner will ensure there is justice for all West Virginians, because we are your lawyer, your voice. Visit us at yourlawyeryourvoice.com. Thank you for your patience and giving us that 40 seconds to recognize our sponsor. Jonathan, let's just dig right into it, man. Let's go ahead and recap West Virginia's win over Oklahoma State this past Saturday, 38-14 in Stillwater. What are your initial thoughts?
Yeah, so if anybody watched last week's show, especially the prediction part of it, you kind of knew where I stood going in, and then you know the outcome. So best case scenario, right? I mean, because it was clear from the opening kick when West Virginia wanted the football, even though they settled, if you want to say that for a field goal, it was clear they were dominant. You know, I kind of joked that I would run the ball 100 times. They tried 65, the most since 1990, I believe it was. Just one rush shy of the record, I think, which was 66. 300 and plus yards, almost 400 yards on the ground. It was, I think it was everything you could ask for, plus more. The team was well prepared. They were ready to play the football game. They were well coached. Offense looked good. Hey, defense looked good, right? I mean, is this Jordan Leslie move to the booth upstairs? Is this all of a sudden the magic that we needed? So many positives. Healthy. Everybody looks good this week. I'm not quite sure. We could pick it apart just a little bit here or there. Maybe didn't finish some drives when you wanted to. But listen, if that's where we're going, it's a pretty good day, you know. So it was just what the doctor ordered last week, coming off of a bye week, and especially heading into this week.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I mean, you couldn't ask for more. I also picked West Virginia to lose the game, so I took the L as well.
Yep.
I'll acknowledge that.
Same here.
But I'd rather be wrong. If I predict West Virginia to lose, I'm happy to be wrong. You know.
Yeah.
So I'll take it. And by the way, that's 2 weeks in a row we've picked them to lose and they won.
Yep. Stay tuned.
So will it happen again? We will know later in the show, because that's where we'll end the show. But in between there, for those of you who might be new to the show, the way we do this, we recap the previous week. Then we do our 3 keys to the game for each of us. Then we do the 2 key position battles, and then we'll do a 1 player to watch. It's a 3-2-1 scenario, and then at the end we give our score prediction.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, West Virginia, it was what the doctor ordered, right? They ran the ball really well, elite running the football, like you said. And Leslie being in the box, which he says he's going to stay there permanently. Could that really have made that much of a difference? You know, it's very interesting to see if they continue to play the way they're playing. It's going to make you wonder, Should he have done that 3 years ago, right?
Yeah, well, I think there was, and I don't want to get this wrong, but I want to say that I believe he mentioned Monday in his presser that he actually kind of had the idea last season and didn't act on it. Just kind of thought maybe it would help. But it's been a good change. There's an old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Right.
But if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to keep getting what you're getting. Something my dad told me when I was growing up. And so I felt like a change was needed, something. Schematically, they talked about it.
Mm-hmm.
Personnel, they talked about it.
Right.
Maybe just a different viewpoint. So far, it seems to be working. It was a successful against Kansas. And we sat back and we said, well, it's Kansas. They've not looked as good. You still maybe gave up some yards. It's Kansas, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then it was Oklahoma State. And listen, I get it. Oklahoma State was a little depleted. Alan Bowman, people been critical at times, but he's still capable of making the big throws. He threw for 300 yards the week before. The defense looked really good. So it's just Kansas? It's just Oklahoma State? Or is it they've stumbled onto something here? We'll see. They're going to be tested this week, we know. But maybe it's just the change they were looking for. So it's hard to walk away from that game. I guess here would be my question. When's the last time, Couz, I don't know, we want to spend a ton of time on it, but when's the last time you watched a meaningful West Virginia football game and you never felt from the beginning to the end it was ever in doubt? Because that's how I felt.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about you, but even when it was 3-0, I felt confident, just the attitudes of the team.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the last time I had that feeling watching a meaningful football game.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say you could go back to last year to maybe Cincinnati or BYU, but those games probably weren't as meaningful as that one. So it's a fair point. It's been a while, really.
Yeah. So it was nice.
Yeah,
nice.
It was nice.
And good on them the coaching staff to be prepared, the team to be focused. It was a really good win, and it sets the stage for just an unbelievable Saturday night in Morgantown coming up.
Now we will move over to the next portion of the show, and this is where we get into the Iowa State preview portion. And we're going to start off with our 3 keys to victory. And this is where Jonathan, now we don't share notes before the show. For those of you, this might be your first time watching, so there might be some overlap here. But nonetheless, we just want it to be more authentic that way. Makes it more surprising and more authentic, like I said. So let's go ahead with you, Jonathan. What is your first key to victory for the Mountaineers this Saturday night?
Yeah, so for me, and it's not going to be too awful surprising, especially after a 389-yard rushing performance last week, but it's run, baby, run. And I think West Virginia has to run the football. It's their strength. And I'll tell you, Couz, when I studied this Iowa State football team, and I think we don't compare notes, but I think you would agree with this. Offensively, but especially defensively, it's hard to find some flaws in this defense. They're allowing just 10 points a game. I want to read a couple notes to you here. 4th nationally in pass efficiency, 5th in pass defense, 6th in turnover margin. They're 8th in interceptions and 13th overall in total defense. But here's what you didn't hear. Didn't hear much about their run game. Giving up almost 140 yards a game on the ground. West Virginia's averaging 223 yards on the ground.
Yep.
So if you have to pick this defense of Iowa State apart just a little bit, a strength of theirs is in the secondary, in the passing game. Probably the biggest weakness of that defense just happens to be West Virginia's strength. So when I see a 380-some yard performance last week, I saw Jaheim White in the second half of last year. That's what it looked like to me. Donaldson's still healthy, not just looking for the point of attack, but explosion through it. Garrett got out of the pocket, created some stuff. And Iowa State's defense is stingy in the fact that they're not going to let you have long, sustained drives. So I think you have to be successful, because I don't know that deep play, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later, I don't know that deep passing play is going to be there much because they're so strong in that secondary. that I think your strength has to live up over maybe their one weakness on defense. Run, baby, run.
Yeah, very fair. And I'll get into my key, but to add on to that, Iowa State is also playing 4 or 5 backup linebackers. They have 4 or 5 linebackers injured, just like Oklahoma State did.
Yeah.
So they're playing a lot of backups, including some walk-ons. So West Virginia, once again, has a chance to capitalize on a team who's suffering from injuries on the defensive side of the ball at the linebacker position. It's very, very ironic that that's happening 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah.
Here we are. Now, that being said, Iowa State is a better defense overall than Oklahoma State is. So I don't expect them to put up 389 yards again. But it is still going to be a key, like you said. The first one I'm going to talk about, Jonathan, is the mindset of the team, because there's a lot of hype around this game. It's a Coal Rush game, right? I've got the Coal Rush shirt on. You've got a black shirt on. This is a Coal Rush edition.
Yeah.
For those of you who are listening, Jonathan and I are wearing black. I've got a black background.
Yep.
It's the Coal Rush edition of the Golden Blue Breakdown Show, right? They got the Coal Rush uniforms. There's been a lot of excitement on social media. Mountaineer fans turning their, even coaches and Ren Baker, everybody turning their profile pictures black.
Yeah.
This kind of reminds you a little bit of what?
Yeah, week one
into Penn State, right? Now, not quite that much hype. We don't have Pat McAfee coming to town and all that.
Yeah.
But what I'm concerned about is, will this team feel pressure because of that? Or will they use it for motivation and get excited and go out and play with an attitude, play with a chip on their shoulder, and use it for energy, positive energy? That's one thing that concerns me is the mindset. Will they once again get anxious and play like they're trying too hard and trying to do too much, trying to force a play versus just letting the game come to them?
Yeah.
That's where I'm going on my first key to the game, is just simply the mindset of the football team.
Yeah. Well, if you've watched this show before, and I think that we probably have some first-time listeners, some first-time folks watching, but I would assume that most of our followers of the show. I laughed when you said that, because I'll piggyback on that here in just a second. It's not my second key to the game. Not to give too much, but agreed. It's you have to be in the moment, and the moment can't be too big for you. And so that's one reason why I felt last week, even though I predicted Oklahoma State to win the game, I was a little bit more confident going into it, because it was, I don't want to say out of sight, out of mind. I think that's the wrong kind of verbiage to use there, but it was a little bit less pressure. Mm-hmm. You're on the road. Maybe you weren't expected to win. Things haven't really been going your way. Well, now what's happened? This has completely shifted back to week one. So, again, don't want to give too much away here, because it might pop its head back up again. But I'll just say I agree.
All right. Fair enough. So what is your second key to the game then?
Yeah, so my second key, be a second-half football team. And here's what I mean by that. As dominant as West Virginia was last week, the second half stumbled a bit, right? There were a couple drives that they didn't finish for various reasons, whether it be penalty, whether it not been able to convert on fourth down, which I will say one of my keys to the game last week was, what the heck, roll the dice. Neil Brown did it again, didn't convert. There was the Garrett Green slide, which I thought was questionable. You don't want to pick it apart, but I thought the second half didn't finish some drives as well offensively. So when I was studying Iowa State, I already had that on my mind a little bit, and I kind of came across this. Their first half, second half splits, Couz, are unbelievable. They're giving up 126 fewer yards passing and 112 fewer yards rushing in the second half alone.
Yeah.
And so what's that tell you?
Halftime adjustments, man.
Halftime adjustments. And so I'm looking at it from a perspective where This is going to be a grinded out football game. We just talked about it. Their defense is stingy. They're giving up 10 points a game. There's not a lot of weaknesses. If you had any complaints last week, it was maybe that you didn't finish in the second half. If you have any success whatsoever against Iowa State in the first half, they're making adjustments. They always do.
Yep.
And so the second key for me is be a second half football team this week. And with that, I'm assuming you're going to take over.
I am, but I've got to. It's so funny what you said that, because I'm not going to say the exact same thing, but it's almost funny. But I shared a tweet today. Somehow a clip of I think it was Iowa State's offensive coordinator giving a speech to his team at halftime of the Baylor game last week, made it online, and I shared it on my Twitter account. I'm going to share it for the audience real quick, because it goes exactly with what you just said. Here is what Cyclone Larry, actually one of the most awesome Iowa State fans on X, he's been trash talking all week, and it is absolutely his trash talk game is phenomenal. But anyway, it's very entertaining. But here is Iowa State's offensive coordinator at halftime of the Baylor game. Hopefully, the volume's up loud enough to hear it.
Got no answers for any of our stuff. We've got a couple little blips that have set us back, and we go right back down the field again. Okay, so you got to have a next play mentality the whole second half, and we're going to come down there. We're going to throw it down the field. Right? There's so much stuff on here we haven't even got to. Got no answers for any of our stuff.
Does that not go perfect with what you just said?
It's perfect. Yeah, absolutely.
They didn't even open up the playbook in the first half.
Yeah. And they exploded second half.
Yeah. But that segues into my second key, which is actually the opposite of yours. I think West Virginia needs to get off to a fast start.
Yeah.
Because to me, if you get off to a fast start, you can get up 10-0 first half, or 10-3, 14-3, something like that. You go into halftime, Iowa State's going to make major adjustments at halftime, and they're going to come out and throw the kitchen sink at you.
Yeah.
If you've already got that lead, and if your first key is working, running the football, if that's working and you have that lead, you can kind of sit on the clock a little bit. I'm not saying you stop passing the ball altogether, because it's too early at that point to just, be totally one-dimensional. But you can still milk the clock, control the clock with your run game. And I think that could potentially play into West Virginia's hands. The other teams Iowa State has played do not run the football as good as West Virginia does.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, West Virginia is the top offense they've played altogether so far this year.
Yeah.
The best offense they played so far is like 80th in the country, or something in that range. West Virginia is 30. I've got it right here. 14th, I believe. No, I'm sorry. Anyway, they're 38th. They're 38th in the country in total offense. So it'll be by far the best offense they've played so far. And if West Virginia can get out to the big lead, and Iowa State gets a slow start, the 3 games they've played against Power 4 competition, they've scored 6 points in the first half total.
Wow. Yeah.
So West Virginia should be able to do better than that. So to me, a fast start is the key. So if they can get off to a fast start and play well in the second half, they will win the football game.
Yeah, because Iowa State's given up under 2.5 yards per carry in the second half.
Wow. That's crazy.
That was a crazy stat to me. So a team that's given up 138 yards rushing a game, but 126 fewer in the second half, and under 2.5 yards per rush in the second half. So goes to your point. They're going to make an adjustment, right? So you have to come in and establish that run game early. Now, to your point, and to West Virginia's credit, this is going to be the best rushing team. I think you could make an argument that it's going to be the best offensive team Iowa State's played, right?
Yep.
And so I think halftime adjustments on both sides will be important here.
Correct.
But Iowa State has proven specifically on defense that they can make those adjustments. and respond well to that. And so, so for me, I just thought you have to be a second half. If you have to match what they're wanting to do, and that's those adjustments. So be curious to see how West Virginia can do that, because we know the formula is there. Proof is in the pudding for Iowa State.
Yep. Well said. All right. What is your third key to the game here?
Yeah, I kind of gave it away. It was use home field advantage. And you stated it perfectly. I even wrote it down on my notes, Couz. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. I felt like as we have gotten a little further into the season now, I want to be careful how I word this, because I'm not trying to come across that West Virginia was a better football team than Penn State. But we've seen a little bit more of Penn State this season, right? They've not quite looked like they did in week one. There were some stumbles along the way. It's been impressive. And so I'm almost kind of looking back on that, and, I'm thinking to myself, I just wonder if the moment – I don't want to say the moment was too big for West Virginia, but if there was too much. It was too much.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about it, Pat McAfee in town. Well, first off, he had a whole offseason, right? I mean, it was talked about for months.
Yep.
Had McAfee in town, big noon kickoff in town, social media. We were talking about it. Everybody was talking about it. I mean, you couldn't hide from. And I felt like sometimes they just put too much pressure on themselves. And that's kind of, and by the time they looked up, it was done. And so for me, I think you just have to look at this moment and just say, hey, we're 2-0 in the Big 12. We're worthy of being here. Look what we did last week. You're in our house. Soak it up. Don't be afraid to make a mistake. It's next play. And so for me, like I said, you talked about it. I just thought that it almost had week one vibes, right? This almost has week one vibes. And so, in fact, I can't believe I don't remember this, but what was Penn State coming into that game? 8th, 6th?
Something like that. It
was top 10, right?
Mm-hmm.
So virtually the same. I mean, you've got an Iowa State team, Couz, that's at 5-0. They're trying to go 6-0 for the first time since 1938. It's a good football team. And you're not going to Ames to play it. It's Coal Rush night. New lights, halftime entertainment, they say. So for me, it's just play relaxed, be calm, engage with the fans. Just don't put too much pressure on yourself. Use your home field, but don't let it get to you.
My third key is I had multiple. I had like 6 different things wrote down for this exercise, Jonathan, today when I was doing my research.
Yeah,
because there's a lot of things that we could use here. But the last one I'm going to pick out is get the ball into the red zone.
Mm-hmm.
Iowa State has only allowed 7 teams to get into the red zone or 7 red zone possessions. 6 of those, though, have been converted.
Okay, good stat.
They have they are 14th. Yeah, 14th in the league in red zone defense. Now, 7's not a huge sample size. That just shows you how hard it is to move the ball on them, for one thing.
Yeah.
Which means field position is going to be really important. But that's another discussion. But West Virginia's red zone offense is 3rd in the conference. They're doing really well. They worked all offseason on it because it was actually something they didn't do well last year.
Yeah.
So if West Virginia can get the ball into the red zone, then I think they have a chance to get points and even touchdowns. Problem is, the challenge is, though, they have to get there. And Iowa State doesn't allow their opponents to do that a lot. But again, West Virginia should be the best offense they've played so far. And I think they have a shot to do it. So get the ball in the red zone. And, you and I have seen 3-3-5 defenses.
Yeah.
There are areas, it's hard to
holes.
cover. They're made to cover. They're made to cover a wide area.
Yeah.
Speed. Well, what negates speed? Lack of space.
Yep.
When you get into the red zone, it shrinks the field down a little bit.
We've seen that firsthand. Yeah.
Correct. Those fast guys can't move around in space like they want to.
Yeah.
It's a little bit easier to score. So I think, not to get too deep into the weeds on it, but West Virginia's red zone offense seems to be statistically anyway better than Iowa State's red zone defense. And then I hope they can take advantage of that in this game. And I think it's a key for them winning the football game.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree with you. And that kind of goes back to the original point that there's not many weaknesses in this Iowa State defense, but if you look, there are a couple that I think West Virginia feels like they can exploit. And like you, I wrote down several things. I'd kind of jotted a few of those things down. I didn't go with them. Glad I didn't now. But yeah, that's an area where I think if you're West Virginia, you feel pretty good at if you can get that ball. The problem here is Iowa State doesn't give up a lot of long drives. They don't let teams sustain drives. They don't commit a ton of penalties. They're not given freebies. And so trying to kind of find those opportunities, maybe few and far between, but you have to capitalize when you get them.
Absolutely. Bingo. Nailed it. All right. Next segment, our position battles. Jonathan and I will each give 2 position battles that we think are important in this game for West Virginia. So, Jonathan, what is your first position battle?
Yeah, so I looked at different options when I was looking at players. And actually just went West Virginia receivers, Iowa State secondary. Here's the reason why. I think West Virginia, we've already talked about it, they're going to have to run the ball. That's a place where we feel like West Virginia can have success. My only concern, though, Couz, is that can you sustain that over 4 quarters? Garrett Green was 1 of 4 last week in passing attempts over 20 yards in air. There were several, and that was the 40-yarder. I believe it was to Hudson Clement. But he threw several deep balls, just weren't able to convert for a couple different reasons. As difficult as it is to throw on this team, and we talked about it, 13th in total defense, 8th in interceptions in the country, pass efficient. They're good. Mm-hmm. You don't have to be great. You just got to connect on a few of those. Maybe Justin Robinson been healthy. Maybe we can say Traylon Ray. Maybe Hudson Clement, Cole Taylor down the seam. I feel like I'm just Jaden Brays. It's a time where we see him connect deep. So I feel like you're not going to be able to live off of the deep ball, but I think you have to connect on a couple of those. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it's how many of those because let me tell you something. If Iowa State secondary is so good, my concern with running the ball, and while I said that it was a number 1 key to the game, is that they're just going to stack that box and force them to throw and just depend on that secondary to do what they do. So I think you have to connect on it. Again, you don't have to be overly successful. You have to be somewhat successful.
Correct. And to piggyback on that a minute, you talk because a stat I heard today when listening to another podcast, the Pro Football Focus podcast, to give them credit, when they were previewing the game, interesting stat they gave was Iowa State's secondary is the 10th highest graded secondary in all of Power 4.
Yeah.
So the secondary is really good. Now, their front 7, not so much. Their front 7, that's why running the ball is going to be so important.
Yeah.
Their front 7 is not highly graded at all. They're actually one of the worst in the country.
Yeah.
So throwing the football is going to be tough in this game. So
yeah. And real quick, I'll say this too. You said something about PFF. PFF also loves West Virginia's offensive line.
They do.
And for the life of me, if I saw this stat on I don't remember where I read it. But I think it said that last week, West Virginia, Garrett Green had almost 4 seconds to throw the football.
Sounds about right.
So if we believe in the West Virginia offensive line, and we do, and I think that may be over at Rivals, Keenan Cummings, I think, is where I read that. But if we believe in this offensive line, and we do, and you can give Garrett 4 seconds almost to throw the football, you have to connect on it. Again, you don't have to be overly successful. You have to be somewhat successful. So,
Yep. All right. Well, my first position battle, I'm going to flip it. Okay. And I'm going to say West Virginia's defensive backs against Iowa State's talented receivers, Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins.
Yeah.
back to Pro Football Focus, two of the highest graded receivers in the country, right? Both of them are very tall. Here are their stats so far this year. Jalen Noel has 24 catches for 451 yards, 2 touchdowns, 18.8 yards a catch. Jaden Higgins, 33 catches, 403 yards, 12.2 yards a catch, 5 touchdowns. Very dangerous. Now, they don't have really a true number 3 guy, but my gosh, when you've got those 2 guys, do you really need a number 3?
Yeah.
I mean, and they play a lot of 2 tight end sets. They play a lot of 12 personnel. I mean, they like to mix it up. But they cannot let Rocco Becht beat them. Iowa State does like to run the football too. They're very balanced. But I've got pretty good confidence in West Virginia's run defense based on what we've seen so far. But it's been the past. Now they looked better last week against Allen Bowman and Oklahoma State, but this is not Oklahoma State here.
Yeah, no
offense to Oklahoma State, but Iowa State's playing at a much higher level than they are. Rocco Becht is a better quarterback than Allen Bowman, and I would argue these 2 receivers are both better than anybody on Oklahoma State's roster.
Yeah.
So West Virginia secondary, hopefully, Aiden Garnes was one of the highest graded DBs in Power 4 in the Big 12 last week.
Yep.
Can he do it again? You know what I mean? Assuming Garnett Hollis is healthy, can he do it? Can they? And I think Aubrey Burks will be back, so that should help. But that West Virginia secondary has got to play well this game, and so to me, that's a key position battle to watch as well.
Yeah, Rocco Becht's no joke. He's thrown a touchdown pass in, I think, 9 straight games. That's like the 5th longest streak in Iowa State history. So through 2 last week against Baylor. Yeah, and I think it kind of goes back to Jordan Leslie been up in the box, right? I mean, how much do we trust this secondary? Now, listen, you and I'll be the first to admit we have seen, I don't even want to say minimal, we've seen significant improvement out of that secondary. I mean, they look really good last week, but they're going to be tested, as you noted, completely different this week. So you feel a little bit good. It's strange to say we feel a little bit good in that area. So we'll see. It'll be game 3 of him up in the box and in the booth watching. And so going to be tested for sure.
Yep. All right. What's your second position battle?
Yeah. So it kind of segues right into what I was saying, because I just went straight up old school, man. I went West Virginia's offense, Iowa State's defense. It sounds so old school, but it's true. It's like, what is West Virginia really good at? Offense, scoring points. What is Iowa State really good at? Stopping offenses. So, again, it kind of sounds cliche to say offense versus defense, but it really is. I mean, you look at these numbers, Iowa State giving up 10 points a game, right? On average. West Virginia scoring more than that. Iowa State's given up 120-some yards rushing per game. West Virginia ran for 389 last week. Statistically, these 2 teams just don't jive when it comes to what one does really well on defense and what one does really well on offense. It's a really weird mix of what I do well, you cover well. And so I looked at certain offensive linemen compared to their defense. Sorry, I forgot his name. They've got a defensive lineman that's really good, 6'4", 350. Dominique something, I forgot. I wanted to mention him, wanted to get him in. I thought about that. I thought about some receivers, but then I thought, really at the end of the day, it is what West Virginia does best and what Iowa State does best. Which team is going to break it? Is West Virginia going to be able to score and Iowa State breaks? Or is Iowa State's defense going to hold West Virginia under their average, and does West Virginia break? And so for me, whichever team doesn't fold and lives up to their statistical category is going to have the edge.
Mm-hmm. Dominique Orange, I think, is the guy you're trying to
Yeah, he was hurt. He got hurt last week against Baylor. Big old dude, man. I mean, he's just a
6'4",
monster.
325.
And is really good.
J.R. Singleton right now, though, is the one leading them. He has 3 sacks on the year. and a forced fumble. So he's playing at a high level too, and he's also a D lineman. He's 6'2", 305. So another big dude up there. But and I'm going to kind of segue right off of that. I'm going to go a little bit more specific though. You were talking about the offensive line. I was afraid you were going to steal my thunder, to be honest, because that's where I'm going. West Virginia's offensive line and Iowa State's D line. If West Virginia wants to win the game, they, like you mentioned, and I've mentioned, we've talked about it I'm almost tired of talking about it. They've got to run the football.
Yeah.
And how do you do it? You get behind that big, experienced offensive line, who, by the way, is the highest graded offensive line in the country. Per PFF. They are the only offensive line in the country with an 80+ grade in both pass blocking and run blocking. The only one. So they are playing at an elite level right now. Wyatt Milam is playing his way in. The guy PFF said he, in his opinion right now, he's the best offensive lineman in the country.
Yeah.
That's a big, or at least he's playing like the best offensive lineman in the country.
Yeah.
So this offensive line, if they can continue to play at that level, we've seen Brandon Yates get comfortable at center.
Yeah.
Jaquay Hubbard's starting to get comfortable at right guard. Tomas Remac's the one guy nobody ever talks about the guy. He never gets his name mentioned, but week in, week out, he goes out and performs.
About Nick Malone.
Nick Malone, second highest graded, one of the highest graded tackles in the league.
It's crazy.
A guy who wasn't even a starter a year ago. So
yeah,
if they can get behind that big offensive line and run that football for 2 halves, they need to do it for the entire game, for 4 quarters. They can't just do it for a half, because you talked about those adjustments Iowa State like to make. If they can do that for 2 halves and those guys don't get worn down, and let's that 3-3-5 defense, they play it really well, but there's only 3 down linemen.
Yeah.
So they will give you a light box at times. They've got to take advantage of that. So to me, that's why I picked West Virginia's O-line. Yes, the defense is important. We talked about that a little bit, but to me, West Virginia wins this game by controlling the clock and running the football. And you do that with your offensive line.
Yeah, agree. And I'll be interested to see, too, because we saw that a little bit last week against Oklahoma State when we knew West Virginia was going to run the football. What did they do? They brought Colt Taylor in. They brought Traylon Davis in.
Oh, he's played. And both of those guys played extremely well.
Unbelievable.
Their receivers blocked well, too.
Yeah. And so against a banged-up defense, as good as they are, running that stack, a little banged up, West Virginia's offensive line is a strength, bringing maybe 2 tight ends. Goes back to my original point. I think you just got to run. But as you said, you've got to do it the whole game. Mm-hmm. That's why I said you have to be a second half. Obviously, you want 4, but they're going to make an adjustment. So if you're West Virginia, it's an area you feel really, really good at. And I tweeted a thing earlier in the week, a PFF, a couple graphs. They just are in love with West Virginia. Mm-hmm. Offensive lineman, Jaheim White, missed tackles, broken tackles. Garrett Green was up there. Hudson Clement was up there. I mean, it was crazy how many West Virginia players were listed. So it's definitely an area where West Virginia feels really good about going into this weekend.
Yep, absolutely. And that's, I don't know if you mentioned this earlier, Jonathan. I don't think I did. But if I'm repeating something, I apologize to the audience. But Iowa, who is probably the toughest opponent Iowa State's faced to date, ran for 204 yards against Iowa State. They are the 13th. They are the they're the 13th ranked rushing offense in the country right now. Yeah. West Virginia is 1 spot behind them and less than a yard behind them.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no reason they shouldn't be able to run for at least 200 yards.
Yeah.
And if they do, I think they win the game.
Definitely. Yeah. I didn't note that, but I did note that they gave up almost 140 yards on the ground. And so I was kind of the blueprint of success, if you want to put it that way. And so, it's reason you talked about it. It's a reason I listed it as my number 1 key to the game. I think West Virginia has to run the football, have to be successful. Certainly no head coach here, but I see opportunities to where they can be successful on the ground.
Honestly, the only reason I think Iowa State won that game is because Iowa turned it over 2 times. Had Iowa not turned it over twice, I'm not sure they'd win the game.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right, let's go to the next segment, which is our one player to watch. Who was your one player to watch?
Yeah, so I will say I'll give a little bit of bragging rights to both of us. Weirdly enough, we've been pretty successful on picking our players to watch. You've done it several times already this season. I mentioned Jaheim White last week, and it was good to see him run for 158 yards. So here we are rolling a dice again and see what magic we can come up with. I went with Garrett Green. Sounds obvious, but I tell you why. I feel like he just kind of is getting a little bit more comfortable each week. I felt like Kansas, he was able to break out a little bit and get more of that out of the pocket. That as wild as it sounds, I feel like that 2-minute offense to end the Kansas State game Kansas game did a lot for his confidence. Kind of got him out of the pocket a little bit. He was moving a little bit. He was using his legs. He was almost just kind of just going along with the flow of the game. And then we went to Oklahoma State. He was successful. I think he ran for 86 yards, just shy of 90 yards, threw the ball pretty well. Had some missed throws, not all of them his fault. But I felt like when he got out of the pocket, he made things happen. And that's Garrett Green. Mm-hmm. And so it kind of plays in with what we're talking about, running the football. I think you're going to have success with that scheme that Iowa State runs. I think they're going to be able to get out a little bit. And I think he's going to be able to use his arm and his legs. So for me, last week had all the makings for Jaheim to break out. When I see this game, I see this being the most athletic quarterback Iowa State will face or has faced all season. And it screams a huge Garrett Green performance for me.
Well said. And I agree with that. And he's not my player to watch, though. But I do agree with it because mine ties into it, and it's Cole Taylor.
Yeah.
For a similar reason. They're going to take away the deep ball probably, which is what Garrett likes to do. This is the game Garrett can prove that he is now a better passer on the short and intermediate stuff. And how do you do that? You got a 3-3-5 defense. You may not have as many players. Or you might not be able to attack downfield, so you attack the middle of the field. You put Colt a 6-7 tight end against linebackers, against maybe a safety. You take advantage of his size and his ability to catch the football, and you get him 3, 4, 5 targets, hopefully, in this game. Mm-hmm. And I think Cole Taylor could be a huge piece in helping. And if you want to run the ball consistently, you've got to be able to get something in a pass game at least. Cole Taylor may be the way they do that since they may not be able to get as much success downfield as they'd like to. So, my player to watch kind of ties into yours. So let's hope for both. If we get on here next week, Garrett Green's thrown for 200 yards and ran for another 75 or 80, and Cole Taylor has 4 receptions and a touchdown.
Yep,
we're both going to pat ourselves on the back.
Yeah. Well, hey, and you talked earlier about red zone offense.
Yeah.
Plays right into that. Who better to throw to in that red zone than Cole Taylor? So, exactly. Love the pick. Absolutely love the pick. Hopefully, we're both right.
Yep, I hope so.
I got a feeling if one of us are right, the other's right, because I think they're going to go hand in hand. So,
absolutely. That's why I said they kind of tie together. But all right, let's get to the part of the show I don't want to do, the score prediction, because I'll be honest with you, I have no friggin' idea what I'm going to say yet. So I'll let you go first.
All right. Well, let me ask you something, Couz. Kansas game, we were recording this show. West Virginia was 1-2. We think we both agree this football team was in a tough spot. You'd lost to Penn State on a huge stage. You beat Albany. Oof. You didn't look great doing it. Then you had the backyard brawl, right? And we know how that went. Don't want to bring that up again. So you're 1-2 and you got Kansas coming in. I predicted Kansas to win that football game. What happened? West Virginia won. Okay. Fast forward to the following week, we go to Oklahoma State. I still quite didn't believe in the team, I picked Oklahoma State to win the football game. What happened?
West Virginia won.
Okay. So they're 2-0. Let me ask you a question before I give it. Do you believe in superstition?
Technically, no, but in my gut, yes. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So they're 2-0 in the Big 12 after I was down on everything. I picked Kansas, they won. I picked Oklahoma State, and they won. You didn't think there was a world where I picked West Virginia to win this football game, did you? 31-27.
I was hoping not.
31-27, Iowa State.
All right. I like it. All right.
And if you followed this show, you know why I'm doing that. 31-27, and I will be 0-3 in the Big 12.
Yeah. All right. My pick, while you were talking, I was listening to you and also kind of formulating my own thoughts. Neil Brown is 2-14 against ranked opponents. He's yet to beat anyone ranked as high as Iowa State is right now, which is number 11 in the country. The team so far has played in one game this year that has had, well, you could say two, actually, that had some hype behind it. They lost them both. Until they do it, until they prove me wrong, I'm picking Iowa State to win the game. I think Iowa State, on paper, is the best team in the Big 12 right now. I do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm being serious about that. I really do. They're number one in the country in defense, or number one in the conference in defensive efficiency. They're number 4 in offensive efficiency.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you're top 5 in defense and offense
efficiency,
you're going to win a lot of football games. So they're really good. They're beatable, though. They're not. It's not that they're not beatable, but that team's coming in with a lot of confidence. You kind of saw that with our O coordinator and what he said in that clip I played earlier. They got some swagger about them, I think. Rocco Beck's dad, we haven't even talked about this. Rocco Beck's dad, Anthony Beck, is getting inducted into the Hall of Fame. So what's that mean? Rocco Beck's probably going to come out and throw for about 300 yards and 2 tutties, 2 or 3 tutties, and run for another 50 yards.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm taking Iowa State. The over-under on the game is 53. It's a 3-point spread. What is that, 27, 24? So I'm going to go, let's see. Yeah, I'm going to go 27-24 Iowa State. I think it's a little bit lower scoring game than what we're used to seeing because of I think it's going to be harder to score on Iowa State. And I think West Virginia is going to try to run the football a lot, so Iowa State may not get a lot of opportunities to get, a whole lot of points. And really that's not Iowa State's game anyway. Iowa State doesn't want to play a shootout. So I'm saying it'll stay 27 or below 30, both teams below 30 at 27-24 Iowa State.
Yeah. So I gave my reasoning as to why I picked up Iowa State to win the game, and it was half hard. I mean, it was but I think you kind of know where I was going with it. I'll say this though, it is really hard when you're studying Iowa State to pick them apart. And you just said it. They do so many things well, and we've not even talked about their special teams, which they're extremely efficient at special teams. They're just Couz's the number 11 football team in the country. Now, having said that, do I feel like this is a winnable football game? Absolutely. Do I feel like this team that we'll see, this West Virginia football team, will be a more prepared football team than we saw week 1? Absolutely. But I think because there are more weaknesses in West Virginia than there are in Iowa State, I go Iowa State. Now, over-under, actually went a little bit over, 31-27. I went 58. And I say that, so I'm 5 points over, but I think West Virginia has more success than anybody else against West Virginia. So I think that score actually will be I went up a little bit because I think West Virginia will actually be able to move the ball a little bit more. But in the end, I just feel like as a whole, and I think West Virginia is trending in the right direction. I really do. We've seen that. But I think as we sit here, I think Iowa State's the better football team. They're a more complete football team.
I want to read off this. You were talking about how it's hard to when you're diving into them, it's hard to find anything that stands out as them being bad at, right? And they're we talked about their rush defense not being all that great. But even when you look at, I've been trying to get into more advanced metrics and more advanced stats. I'm not great at it yet, but here I will say this. This is something simple we can all understand. Even me. When I look at the advanced stats, there's things like havoc rate, stuff rate, points per attempt, offense, all this explosiveness, all these different metrics, right? Of all the metrics that are on there, and there's probably 2, 4, 6, 8, 12. There's probably a couple dozen metrics, if not 3 dozen metrics on this sheet, on this chart.
Mm-hmm.
Green means you're above average. Red means you're below average, and no color means you're average. Iowa State had 2 green boxes on the entire thing. I mean, I'm sorry, 2 red boxes on the entire thing. 2. Yeah. 2 metrics that they're below average in. They were explosiveness on pass defense and total offensive explosiveness. That's the only 2, and they weren't that far off on those 2.
Yeah.
West Virginia had 6 that they were red in. Iowa State had 17 where they were green, which is above average. West Virginia had 14 that they were green and above average.
Okay.
So West Virginia is trending they had a lot more reds a week ago, by the way. West Virginia did. So they're trending in the right direction, but they still have a long ways to go. But man, I just wanted to kind of give the audience an idea of there's not a whole lot of holes on this team on the defensive side. But the ones that are there do line up a little bit with what West Virginia likes to do, and that's run the ball. So hopefully that will be enough for West Virginia to get the win. But again, because of that lack of weaknesses and how good I think I'm not picking Iowa State because I think West Virginia is a bad team.
Yeah,
I'm picking Iowa State because I think Iowa State is the best team in the Big 12. Period.
Yeah, across the board. Yeah, I mean they're efficient in every category. So again, we talked about picking them apart a little bit, and it's kind of hard to do it. But even in areas where we think we can pick them apart, they're still not giving up a ton. Right. And when they are giving up, they're making the adjustments in the second half to compensate for what they did.
Correct.
So it's going to be tough, but I'll just say that I hope at about 11 o'clock, 11:30 Saturday night, I hope that I am 0-3 in the Big 12.
Same.
And West Virginia's 3-0. And until that changes, I'm going to keep going with it. So I'm half-hearted on it. I am playing with that with a little bit of fun. But again, because it's a number 11 team in the country that is good in just about every single statistical category. Like you said, and if you and I agree on anything, and we agree on a lot, I'm not picking Iowa State to win because that's, I think, so little of West Virginia. Because I am actually extremely encouraged by what I'm seeing out of this football team. It may have been a depleted Oklahoma State team, but for me personally, that showed me a lot going to Stillwater and winning that football game in the manner in which they won it. So I'm not picking, and you said it, I'm not picking Iowa State because I feel negative towards West Virginia. I think Iowa State's that good. So
yep, same, agreed. I've been saying all along, I think Iowa State was one of my teams to win a conference.
Yeah,
I thought going in, they have like 20 guys back from 19 or 20 guys back from last year's team that went 7-6.
Yeah.
Matt Campbell's a great coach. John Haycock might be the best defensive coach in the country. He's up there. So, it's just there's not a lot you can look at and say they're a bad team.
Well, and when we look at the Big 12, Couz, do we feel like BYU is going to continue their success? I don't. I think Utah, with their quarterback situation, has question marks. I think Colorado, as good as they are offensively, I've got some questions there as well.
They're an anomaly right now.
They are, yeah. And then you start looking at some other teams. Oklahoma State's falling apart. Kansas State
Can't throw the football right now.
Can't throw the football, and all they're doing is loading the box on them, and they don't have as good of running game as even say West Virginia, I don't believe. So when you look at this Big 12 right now, it goes two things. Number one, Iowa State, clear-cut, best team right now in the Big 12. Secondly, and I talked about this on my podcast the other day. This season has been all about the words from the very beginning, even before West Virginia played a football game. Opportunity, opportunity, opportunity. You got two good wins. Going into the season, we didn't realize Kansas was going to kind of fall off the radar a little bit, right? But you got that. We didn't realize that Oklahoma State was going to fall apart, but you still got it. So you find yourself at 2-0 with an opportunity here. What happens next? Kansas State at home, night game. Then you get Arizona. It's in front of you. And then you've got some teams that you're battling right now, Cincinnati, UCF. Hey, here's a team for you. How about Texas Tech? So you have some unbelievable opportunities. And listen, I'm not trying to get cart before the horse here, but if you're West Virginia, you need to, and their motto now has been, and you know this, 1-0.
Yep.
It's even in the building. It's even in the building now.
They covered up the season schedule with 1-0.
1-0. And if they can go 1-0 this week, another at-home huge night game next week. So even though I've got Iowa State winning a football game, I think this is a winnable game for West Virginia.
Yep.
And then, boy, it gets real quick.
I just think they have to play almost flawless to do it. That's my take.
They do.
The 1-0 thing, by the way, I think that was a genius move by Coach Brown because of the mindset we talked about earlier. He doesn't want to see him get distracted. And that's his way of trying to keep them from getting distracted is say, hey, let's just focus on this week because he knows the gauntlet they're facing. But he doesn't want the team to be thinking about it, right? That's his job to worry about. They don't need to be they need to be thinking about doing their job this week. And if they do their job this week, they could walk out of Morgantown 3-0 Saturday night, sitting really nice, really pretty, and everybody in the nation, or everybody that covers the Big 12 at least, will be going, hey, wait a minute, this West Virginia team's for real.
Yep.
Then we'll talk next week. If that happens, we'll talk next week about A, that we were wrong again, and B, that, okay, now can they handle being successful?
Yeah.
Right? Okay. All right.
Yep.
Real quick before we jump out of here, everybody, Jonathan, find him on X at Jonathan K. Martin, at Jonathan K. Martin. Find us both at GB Breakdown _ on X. It's the account for this show. I'm at Couz 206. Jonathan also has a podcast called the Jonathan Martin Podcast. It's on Apple, Spotify, everywhere, right, Jonathan?
Yep. It is easy to find. You just go to my social. There's links right there. A lot of what we talk about here, but we dive into a few other things as well.
Yeah, it's not going to be – you can listen to that and this show, and it won't be repetitive. You're going to get a little different flavor. You don't have to listen to me talk. You can just listen to Jonathan and get his takes. But and he's also on X. He's writing some really good articles over there on X articles, and he's now doing some subscriber specific stuff, right? Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, there's some content there, so you can subscribe. It's $2 a month. It helps me just pump out some more content. I talked about that last week, but as you know, in the technology world we live in, it's not cheap. So everything I take gets pumped back right into bringing more content. And speaking of the article, on Saturday mornings, we always have our previews and prediction article that I publish where you join me, along with a couple other contributors that do it every week, and then try and have a guest picker from the opposing school. Sometimes it's a little bit tough, but to get somebody. But we've had good success given our previews and predictions, and we're keeping a running tab of our how good we're doing, and some of us struggling more than others. But we have a good time with it. So everything we do, we pump right back into the content.
Yeah,
we really enjoy it.
Yep. Yeah, I enjoy it. I actually just listened to Jonathan's latest episode today while I was traveling. So Really good stuff. Anyway, and by the way, go to that show and leave a 5-star review for Jonathan, and do the same on this one if you don't mind. If you're listening to this on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcast, leave us a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel, share it with your family and friends. We're here for you every week. May we don't know yet. We may even do some stuff during hoop season. More to come. But right now we're focused on football, and we're focused on Iowa State and the Coal Rush, baby. Coal never quits. Neither do the Mountaineers. Cue Country Roads, and we're out of here.